We do have one topic that we really wanted to discuss as well, and that involves, as I said, your former boss, actually, Mr. Cenk Uygur over at TYT. If anyone's not familiar, back in the day when TYT was actually good and worth watching, Jordan was head of the investigations aspect of TYT. TYT Investigates, and I used to really, really dig your stuff over there. And around the time you left is kind of when TYT started going downhill, at least if you ask me. But as I said, Cenk Uygur, head of TYT, founder of TYT, is getting massive amounts of shit online right now because he admitted to planning on voting for pro-police billionaire real estate tycoon Rick Caruso, who's currently running for mayor of Los Angeles against Karen Bass. Karen Bass, who happens to be endorsed by Bernie Sanders. I think Bernie Sanders is actually out there stumping with Karen Bass today. So pretty crazy stuff that Cenk Uygur is coming out against the Bernie Sanders endorsed candidate and is instead endorsing this billionaire Republican who only recently switched his registration to Democrat, basically just in order to run in this race. So before we get your analysis on Rick Caruso and Cenk Uygur's endorsement of him, let's take a look at where this all started. We reacted to this yesterday, and we've been reacting to and breaking down a lot of the kind of tough on crime, Fox News framing of the issue of crime rhetoric coming out of TYT and specifically from Cenk and Anna. And Cenk put this tweet out yesterday, a real banger. LA is a mess. There's trash all over the roads. Cops don't respond to calls. It's close to anarchy here. Again, it sounds like he lives in fucking Gotham City, as our good friend Olayemi once said. Just this sounds like some Fox News bullshit, obviously. And this guy responds to him. I guess this is an anchor for Fox LA, and asks, "Are you voting for Caruso?" Sounds like you're espousing the same kind of tough on crime rhetoric that Caruso is. And Cenk responded to that by saying, "Yes. Karen Bass's main message seems to be that she is an establishment Democrat, no interest, who thinks things in LA are generally fine. They're not, and will work the system better. The problem is the system. There's nothing but incompetence and corruption here. We need change." And again, there's nothing like necessarily incorrect about that. I don't think Karen Bass is the most amazing progressive candidate ever. She's not a socialist or anything like that. I mean, she's endorsed by Bernie Sanders, but still, she's definitely, not the most amazing, inspired progressive ever. I'll give him that. And if he was putting out the statement saying, "Yeah, I'm not going to vote for Karen Bass because she's an establishment Democrat. Instead, I'm going to vote for this Green Party candidate," or something like that, then I wouldn't care. In fact, that would be kind of based. Unfortunately, that's not the conclusion he reached. And he's saying, yes, I'm voting for Rick Caruso, who's far to the right of Karen Bass. Like I said, billionaire real estate developer, pro-police to the core, super tough on crime. It would be like, voting for a Mike Bloomberg style candidate. That's the best kind of analogy I could think of. But what was your initial reaction to this, Jordan? I saw you had one of the best responses to this. Was not on my bingo card for Cenk to come out as a Republican before Jimmy Dore. It wasn't on my bingo card either. Although, like I said, given all of the tough on crime rhetoric and just insane Fox News framing on these issues, it's not entirely unsurprising, but damn, he really just came out here and fucking said it.
Oh, where do you begin? Good old Cenk. Well, I'm not like totally surprised. For your audience to know, by the way, Caruso was a Republican and he just filed as a Democrat in January. So he's basically a Republican, just running as a Democrat. His plan is to put 1,500 more cops in the LAPD. The LAPD budget is already, I think, like $7 or $8 billion, and he wants to add 1,500 more cops. Yeah, I mean, Cenk, when I was at the Young Turks, we had some disagreements occasionally in shouting. But the thing that stood out to me is he was never really like that down on capitalism. He is a capitalist. And, in some cases, we could debate that, and some people who are not like burn it down, you could have a healthy debate. But he was pro-capitalist, as news has come out in recent years, not so big on unions, busted a union at the Young Turks. And what's really warped about this and shows you how disconnected he is kind of from like grassroots progressivism. Yeah, we agree on Karen Bass. She's not going to change anything. But literally what you're describing, and by the way, I don't think there's any trash in Cenk's community because he's a millionaire. What he's describing, Rick Caruso is in large part responsible. This is an economic problem in cities like LA. Why there's, quote, anarchy is because you have an affordable housing crisis. You have a massive affordable housing crisis that has created mass homelessness in people in places like LA because people like Rick Caruso, who is a billionaire real estate developer, have bought off the Los Angeles City Council and the mayor. So they are allowed to do whatever they want. They are allowed to. He has 2 big malls that he has put in that bulldozed where people lived. His high-rise luxury apartment condos that he has put in have added to the gentrification in Los Angeles that has increased prices. So the very stuff that Cenk is talking about, Rick Caruso and his ilk are largely responsible for. And why there is a crime problem, and there's a lot of propaganda out there, but there is not, in cities like LA and a lot of major cities, the murder rate is actually down. The crimes that are increasing are petty crimes, theft, robbery, because people are fucking starving, Cenk. The masses are hungry. I just did a reporting tour like 2 months ago. I went through Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. Contrary to the bullshit that comes out of the corporate media, this is not an historic economic recovery. This is historically bad. People are really struggling even before this latest round of inflation. And I don't even think Cenk understands that's why there's such a big crime problem, because economically people are really struggling. So if you don't want to support Karen Bass, all right, that's fine. But to then say we need change and the way to get that change is to vote for the Republican real estate billionaire who has bought off the city government, Cenk's all about corruption. That is rank corruption. Rick Caruso has purchased politicians. It's just, I don't know. It's completely backwards. It doesn't make any sense. And he had me, he did some other tweets where he was a little bit more aggressive, critical of Bernie and others, which I have been. They have not agitated enough. So good for that. Good for you on that. But to then say the answer is let's vote for the Republican. No.
Dave Weigel here. I think he no longer works at the Washington Post. He used to work at the Washington Post, but he's a pretty good reporter. He said Rick Caruso gets the TYT founder's endorsement. Meanwhile, Bernie's headed to LA tomorrow to campaign for Karen Bass. Again, pointing out that now Cenk is, on the opposite side of Bernie Sanders when it comes to this mayoral election. Cenk responded, Bernie and Bass believe in working within the Democratic Party system. And what has that gotten us? Nearly nothing. Just wall-to-wall corruption. Bernie said his friend, Joe Biden, would get us $15 minimum wage and much more. His friend screwed us, and he didn't say a word about it, which is true. As you said, Jordan, that's 100% true. But that would be like saying, Bernie's not good enough, therefore I'm going to vote for Mike Bloomberg.
But I don't understand what he's talking about. He's talking about criticizing Bernie for working within the Democratic Party. He created the Justice Democrats. He literally created the Justice Democrats that works within the Democratic Party. Now, obviously, people are on different sides. Some people want a Dem exit. Some people want a Dem enter. I say, go with God, whatever you choose. But Cenk, for the last 20 years of the Young Turks, his argument has been, we got to take over the Democratic Party. Now, if he wants to come out now and say, you know what, I've had an evolution. I think it's a lost cause. We need to build a third party or whatever the case may be. That's fine. People are entitled to, change their mind if it seems genuine. But he is now criticizing Bernie for the exact same thing that he says he was going to do. And I remember, if you saw the unhinged videos when Trump won in 2016, he said, we are going to war with the Democratic Party here at TYT. And I was excited about it. I was still at TYT at the time. That didn't happen. There was no war between TYT and the Democratic Party. He went on, listen, I think obviously Trump should have been covered. He was president. He was doing and saying a lot of terrible things. But TYT in the Trump years, it was like 90-10 in terms of Trump, the focus on Trump and Trump derangement, and not really focus on Democratic Party corruption, neoliberalism, the fact that the Democratic Party's response to losing to an orange orangutan was to create Russiagate. TYT was barely addressing those things. So I'm all for if Cenk wants to be more critical of Bernie now and the squad. They're not gods. They are public servants. They're deserving of criticism and scrutiny. But when you then turn around and say, home of the progressives, rebel headquarters, and we need change. So vote for the billionaire real estate developer.
Yeah, I did want to show a couple reactions off because, like I said, Cenk put out this statement. It is what it is, but he got a lot a lot of pushback from a lot of different people. This was one that I thought was particularly interesting. Mondaire Jones actually came out to scold Cenk. Here we go. In response to Cenk saying that, I hope Karen Bass proves me wrong, but I would be shocked if she changed the status quo even a tiny bit. What did she do in Congress? Approximately nothing. That's what establishment Dems always do. LA desperately needs change. If you think it doesn't change, that's amazing. Which again is fine. Like that's in a vacuum, that's a correct statement. I'm not a big fan of Karen Bass myself. I'd probably vote for her if I lived in LA, but it's not like I would be super excited for her to be the new mayor. I think he's right that she probably won't change the status quo. But to say that a correct answer to that is to embrace a far right wing, pro-police billionaire instead, that's absolutely crazy. That's like saying, Bernie Sanders is too milquetoast, therefore we got to get behind Mike Bloomberg. It makes no sense at all. And in response to that, Mondaire Jones, again, congressman from New York, 14, I want to say. Did he recently lose his?
Yeah, he lost.
No longer going to be in Congress. But yeah, Mondaire Jones from New York, who was a Justice Democrat, if I remember correctly. Again, Justice Democrats being the organization that Cenk himself founded, came out here and says, this isn't fair. Congresswoman Bass fought tooth and nail to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which we did in the House. No small feat, given the anxiety of some moderates, but which stalled in the Senate because of GOP obstruction and Tim Scott's bad faith. So Mondaire Jones coming out here and saying, this is some bullshit, man. This is crazy talk. What was your guys' response to that?
I mean, I don't know the intricacies of what happened behind closed doors. I do know a lot of things passed the House because Nancy Pelosi knows it won't pass the Senate. So she does it as messaging bills, knowing that it has no chance to pass the Senate. Yeah, I mean, Karen Bass, listen, in her heart, I'm sure she doesn't like seeing Black people murdered by police. I'm sure if it were up to her, she'd maybe want a more generous social safety net. I don't see, based on her temperament or record, her willing to fight for any of that. But yeah, I mean, I guess I agree with Mondaire Jones in the fact that it at least she has fought for things. There's only so much power you have as a single congressperson to like overthrow a corrupt system. Where I think Cenk gets it terribly wrong is his tweets keep saying we need change. Well, I question the acumen of your commentary if you think that change is going to come from a billionaire real estate developer. You could say, you know what, I believe in voting, but in this case, I'm not going to vote. I can't bring myself to vote for another Democrat who's not going to do anything. Or you could say, I don't believe in Karen Bass, but I'm going to hold my nose, vote for her, and then we're going to go the TYT army. I'm going to, put out the bat signal, and we're going to hold Karen Bass's feet to the fire here in LA. We're going to demand affordable housing, and we're not leaving City Hall until she does some things. So I think Mondaire Jones is right. But at the same time, I think Cenk is showing that if his idea of change is now put the billionaire in there, that's kind of like what a lot of people thought about Trump. A lot of Republicans in 2016 said, we need change, and I'm just going to roll the dice on this used car salesman who made a lot of money.
That's what's crazy about this, right? For somebody who dragged relentlessly the people that voted for Donald Trump and like, how could you be swindled by this? How could Cenk Uygur, the man who for hours and hours every day talked about like, oh, we've got to take on the billionaire class. We've got to tackle the oligarchy. We need Bernie Sanders to lead our movement, built his entire network's popularity on the back of the Bernie Sanders movement, and then is going to turn around and be like, no, we want the good billionaire to save us. And he's not even a good billionaire. He's a vile billionaire, to borrow Gotham City analogy. He could be a Batman villain for all we know as his side gig, right? I mean, a billionaire fucking weasel real estate tycoon. I don't know. But yeah, it's just absolutely absurd because to me, I actually kind of find myself in a vacuum agreeing with Cenk's tweet way more. Like, yeah, you know what? Like, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act was really watered down, and it was not what activists were asking for. And you could say, well, that was the best that they could get. But, to Jordan's credit, this was a virtue signal anyway. Why not fucking fight for more? Why not send a message that we're going to put our foot down and we're actually going to bring change about this? Like, I mean, Karen Bass has been a pretty status quo Joe. And I remember even reading preliminary VP speculation that had her name included on the list. It was deep down. She was not going to get picked. But, this is still the kind of framework that her career has been under, where it wouldn't be like unquestionable, like, oh, this progressive stall. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, she's obviously a moderate. Everything that Cenk is critical of her for is pretty much true. Everything that he's being critical of Bernie Sanders right now is pretty much true. It's massively hypocritical given the kind of criticisms he's offered other people who came to this conclusion before him. But it's also just mind-boggling that he takes all of that information and he's like, let's go back to the billionaire. Let's go back to the guy that was one of the chief architects of the massive displacement in LA, the skyrocketing rent prices.
Yeah. So again, pretty crazy that Mondaire Jones felt the need to come out here and push back on what Cenk is saying. Let's take a look at another response Cenk got here. Let me find it real quick. He says that, yes, Karen Bass's main message seems to be that she is an establishment Democrat, no interest, who thinks things in LA are generally fine. They're not, and will work the system better. The problem is the system. There is nothing but incompetence and corruption here. We need change. LOL. We need a billionaire to change things. We need a pro-police Republican to change things. Anyway, Emma Vigeland, who actually used to work at TYT under Cenk Uygur, says the anti-establishment candidate is the former Republican billionaire real estate tycoon. So many of these problems can be traced back to housing. Caruso will give real estate developers free rein that can only exacerbate the conditions you describe. So again, I think it's pretty telling that even his former employees and people that are definitely part of the same sort of media space as TYT felt the need to come out here and distance themselves from this kind of rhetoric and be like, this is insane, bro. This is fucking batshit crazy.
Yeah, I mean, she's right. And listen, I mean, at the end of the day, it does sound very NIMBY of Cenk. I could promise you he does not live in a community that has trash everywhere. It's not an episode of The Walking Dead where Cenk lives. So it kind of seems to be like Cenk's leaving his gated community, drinking a latte in the morning. And like 15 minutes down the road, he's like, ugh, look at the trash and the homeless people, you know? And that doesn't sound very progressive to me. So yeah, I mean, it's backwards. You know, there might be a chance he walks it back, but I mean, the thing that kind of I question is TYT's branding and its marketing. And actually what partially made me excited to join there in 2016 was the TYT Army and the Wolf Pack. And, you know, yeah, they were commentators and all that, but they had kind of the activism wing. You know, they held rallies to try and pressure people, and Wolfpack was trying to get constitutional amendments. So why Cenk is taking this turn rather than saying, you know what, fuck it, I'm done trying to work within the Democratic establishment. We're going to go to war with the Democrats, and I'm bringing the TYT Army. You know, we're going to be outside Karen Bass's City Hall every day, demanding affordable housing. We're going to be, outside AOC's office and the squad's office, demanding that they actually agitate for a $25 minimum wage. $15 minimum wage is too low. Activate the grassroots. You might even get some viewers back that you lost if you do that. But instead of doing that, he's kind of like in a weird pseudo way, advertising for Republicans. And that is basically what he's been preaching against as long as I've known him.
Yeah, totally crazy. Again, getting a lot of pushback for this. Here's Adam Kindler, who
Andy.
I guess is, Andy Kindler, who I guess is on the Bob's Burgers podcast. He says, I'm unfollowing Cenk Uygur and anyone else looking to weaponize the homeless problem in LA by throwing their support behind a crony capitalist billionaire. Please join me. And Cenk says, God bless, brother. I don't begrudge your opinions. Everyone is allowed to disagree and act upon it. Cenk's taking so much shit for this. He responded to Mondaire Jones too. That's not fighting tooth and nail. You guys didn't need a single Republican vote. There's a bullshit etiquette in DC, and you're not supposed to fight fellow Democrats, but it was fellow Democrats who killed the bill in the Senate, as well as the rest of your agenda. That actually is 100% true. And he goes on to say, Mondaire, I saw you fight. You were one of the few fighters. Actually, that's kind of bullshit. Mondaire Jones was not really much of a fighter, to be honest. And he says it was fellow Democrats who screwed you over for it. Establishment Democrats killed the George Floyd Act, voting rights, $15 minimum wage, paid family leave, etc. I never saw Bass fighting back against them. And again, that's all true. Basically, Cenk's analysis is correct, but the answer to the failures of Democrats is not to embrace Republicans. And I feel like Cenk should understand that. Like if I was out here in 2016 saying, Hillary Clinton has so many issues, maybe we should vote for Donald Trump. I think everyone would agree, including on TYT, that that's a terrible idea. What
it sounds to me like he's advocating, without putting it in words, is we just need to burn down the house. We need to, and the only way to do that is vote for Republicans. and that will show the Democratic Party. Well, I think we've already seen that if Republicans take power, the Democratic Party doesn't then move to the left; they move further to the right. We saw that with Trump. So yeah, I don't understand. And the other thing, none of us live in LA, but if you do live in LA, you know, forever the LAPD is out of control. Cenk knows that. Black people, Hispanic people, indigenous people are under siege by the LAPD every day. They have, again, I might be off by $1 billion or $2 billion. I think they have a $7-8 billion budget. And Cenk should know that if this guy, Rick Caruso, becomes mayor, he's already saying, I'm going to put 1,500 more police in there. That's going to just make the brutality even worse against the most vulnerable people. So I don't know how you're a progressive, but you're kind of overlooking that. Okay. And okay, so they'll sweep up more homeless people. What do you want them to put them in the Pacific Ocean, Cenk? I mean, it's really backwards. I would respect him more if he just said, listen, I don't tell other people what to do, but I'm sitting this one out. I'm not voting for either person because I can't keep voting for the same old Democratic establishment. But to then say, I want change, so I'm voting for him. And again, I don't have any intel, but it would not surprise me at all if behind closed doors, Cenk had spoken with Caruso and maybe thought, oh, this is a changed man. And he's not, one of the worst billionaire vultures. Cenk
is dumber than even I thought.
Yeah. So it's backwards. And by the way, knowing TYT, their audience was relatively younger when I was there. There was a lot of kind of 16 to 24-year-olds who watch TYT. So I don't know if it's still that way, but these people are new in their political knowledge. They're impressionable. I'm not condescending to them, but they follow Cenk's lead and TYT's lead. So I don't like that, potentially younger people just first consuming politics would be exposed to, hey, the Democratic Party is corrupt. So let's, stick our middle finger to them and vote for the billionaire. That ain't good.
Right. And yeah, look, here's David Dole also calling him out. Cenk pretty much getting called out by the entire spectrum of his supposed allies in progressive media. Pretty funny to watch, to be honest. You just get absolutely roasted from all sides for this dog shit take. You love to see it, to be honest. But yeah, that probably wraps up our segment on Cenk endorsing Republican fascist pro-police billionaire Rick Caruso and the fallout he's experienced since. I guess at least he was brave enough to be honest about who he's voting for, and didn't I mean, he had to know that this pushback was coming, so I guess at least he's not just lying to his audience. But now we know who this guy really truly is.